The Reef Therapy Podcast is powered by ICP Analysis. If you'd like to win a free saltwater ICP analysis kit and a freshwater analysis kit, all you have to do is leave a comment down below using the hashtag What's in Your Water. If you're listening to the audio-only version, head on over to YouTube and you can enter in the comment section there. ICP Analysis will test over 50 elements down to parts per trillion. These tests can also be used to see if there's any undesirable elements in your aquarium as well. Register your aquarium on the ICP Analysis app, fill your sample, place it back into the bag, slap on that included postage, and have your results 1 to 3 days after it's received. More at icpanalysis.com. Hey, Reef Builders, and welcome to episode number 90 of the Reef Therapy Podcast powered by ICP Analysis. Today, we'll get an update on everything with us, and then we'll also chat with our guest, Austin Lefevre, as Raj told me to say it.
I would never say anything like that. I can't believe you would blame me.
How do you say your last name?
I answer to anything, but Lefevre is how I'm told it's supposed to be said.
Lefevre of Tenji Aquarium Design and Build. So happy to have you on tonight. Thank you for joining us.
Of course. Thanks so much for the invite, guys. Glad I could make it.
Well, do you want to go around the horn, Raj? Anything new in your tank world?
Not really. Haven't made much progress, shocker, since we last talked. I take that back. Austin, I'm curious if you've tried this product, but I just got it from Champion. It's called SeaTac, and it's some sort of adhesive that you can use underwater that cures underwater, but it's really tacky. But it looks like it could work really well for the rock through the glass project that I'm still tinkering with. So kind of excited to test that out. And I got sidetracked a bit and was going to try and just see how this SeaTac stuff sticks to all kinds of things around the office. And, it's going to be fun when people discover their little nubs of rock randomly all over the place.
Definitely heard of it and excited to try it at some point. We haven't gotten our hands on it. I'm not personally huge on prototyping for big projects, so I love you guys to go out and try it for me, and then I'll put it to the test. But I have seen that around, so keep me posted. I'm excited to see what comes of it for sure. Yeah,
definitely. I'll post some stuff about it, and I'll definitely let you know. I'm kind of excited about it, so we'll see.
Nice.
It rocks to stick to file cabinets really well with it, but not so much glass.
New article in the works.
You know what's hilarious, Raj, is that my daughter has this journal every week that we have to respond to as parents. So we have to go in and Dear Emerson, and we have to go through. She had in her journal last week how they learned about Dale Chihuly and his blown glass, and I thought that was so funny. Like my third graders learning about blown glass and your light coverings, essentially.
That's amazing. Does she pronounce his name correctly? Because that's a big bonus.
She actually, she corrected me. I was like, Dale Chihuly? Heck yeah, man. And she was like, it's Chihuly, Dad. Okay.
All right.
Dale with the eye patch. Anything else going on in your world, Raj, or shall we move on?
I mean, same as usual. Just gearing up for next year. That's all.
Very good. Very good. Red Sea is still kicking. Got through my first water exchange. It was fantastic. As you can see behind me, still very bare in there, which is fine by me at this point. Purple Tang is in. Purple Tang has not disturbed the peace in the tank thus far, which is good. Also ended up with that assessor basslet in there too. So all the tank community members are good so far. We'll see what happens as they age and get larger, but I think for the most part they're all doing their jobs and keeping that algae down in this first ugly phase of the tank. I think what's also helped is the live sand from the Caribbean. I really think that's helped a lot with keeping this at bay per se. So and that unknown crab in the sump is also doing a heck of a great job. So
it's always the unknown crab in the sump, right?
Yeah. I think we should name him eventually, but it has to be a French name. No offense, Austin, but
No, you're
I
good.
just feel like all crabs are French for whatever reason. Maybe it's Jacques from Finding Nemo. I don't know.
There you go.
Austin, offhand, I guess, is there anything that is challenging you right now that you'd like to kind of get off your chest as part of reef therapy before we get to know you?
Well, that I can talk about. Well, there's a vendor called MRC that I'm always struggling to get a hold of. No, just kidding. Um, no, not particularly. I'll say we have had a couple of vendors be a little slower than usual lately, and I've heard some odd replies as to why that's happening. We're well beyond coronavirus working, so it's just a function of people getting busy, not really being totally prepared for it, and then backing right up to the holiday season. So we've been through it before, and it feels good to say that out loud, though. Thanks for giving me the opportunity, Remy.
yeah.
But yeah, no, nothing else at the top of my head for sure.
Okay. Well, let's get to know you a little bit. Let's hear about your journey in this hobby. From where it started, even as a kid, if that applies. Your first tank, and then on up to what has led you to Tenji, your current spot.
Sure. Yeah. That should probably be easier to answer than it is. I was actually going through some old photos the other day. A friend passed away, unfortunately, and I was looking for some old photos of us, and I stumbled across a whole section of SeaWorld photos. There was a SeaWorld in Ohio when I grew up, and I'm from Michigan, Southeast Michigan. And it looks like we went 2 or 3 times a year back in the day. And then we had the Toledo Zoo. And so I was always kind of infatuated with, aquatic life. My first tank, I believe, held newts, firebelly newts. I had a trio of them, Larry, Curly, and Mo. And then my dad cleaned the tank with a pretty heavy bleach solution, and they didn't make it too long after that, unfortunately. We got into fish at some point. I was 8 to 10, and didn't know a heck of a lot about dechlorinators and the appropriate way to keep things going. And I do vaguely recall a betta fish being in with some goldfish at one point. So we had some tough learning lessons as a kid, but I really got into it like early high school. I started keeping some bigger freshwater tanks, and the store I was working with just always said, you're a pretty good aquarist. You have a decent sized tank. You should consider saltwater. And we all know what a slippery slope that can turn into. So my first saltwater tank was a 75 gallon. And this store I kept going back to. I kept looking at angelfish. That's what really always grabbed my attention. And it was Pomacanthus nivarchus. What's the majestic angel? It's a common name, I think. They had one transitioning, and I was like, wow, the colors are so funky. And he showed me what it would eventually become, and I kind of fell in love with that fish. So that was actually my first fish that I brought home. It got pop-eye pretty quick because I had too much darn live rock in the tank. And I went back to the store saying, what kind of fish did you sell me? It's got this popped out eye after a couple of days, and lots to learn after that. So I think that was like 2001. 2001, and then I actually started working for that store the next year in 2002 while I was in high school. So that was my first kind of foray into the industry. I worked.
How much was a majestic angel back in 2001?
Fantastic question. And this store was known to have pretty cheap fish. So I'm gonna guess like $40, 35, $40 maybe, because it was an expensive, fish for the time, I would say. I recall us having a lot of fish available for $10, $15, $20. But the Nivarchus was, the next step up from that, if you will.
Sure.
Did it make it? Did you?
It did make it. Yeah, it did make it, and then I wanted to get into coral as the progression goes, right? And the store was quick to say, "Don't you dare put coral in with with that fish," and I didn't listen. And the fish visited the coral frequently and turned it into a nub. So eventually, I did wind up trading in that fish, and I actually regret it to this day. I never kept a Nivarchus angel personally again. I've worked with a few dozen of them since then, but I never kept one again. And then yeah, I've been doing it professionally pretty much since then. I did take about a year and a half hiatus, and worked for an engineering company. The more typical career, if you will, and just found myself kind of bored to tears. I wasn't great behind a desk, I suppose, and I was still writing for the industry and did some side work at the time, so I never fully left. But then jumped back in head first and took a giant pay cut and said, I'm going to try and make this fish thing work. So yeah, worked for that company for a while, and then I went off on my own. At some point, I want to say probably 2011 or so. And I ran a couple different businesses in Southeast Michigan. We did ponds and water features was one side of it, which was really big in that area. It's becoming more popular where I am out here now, which is Central California. A lot of koi ponds and then just simple water features too. And I was still into aquariums at the time, but they were a different enough business that I decided to separate it. And so the other section was the aquarium business, and that's how I eventually met our lovely co-host, Mr. Raj here. Got into bigger builds over time, and needed various equipment, and started traveling with the Cherry Corals boys, who are still around today. Yeah. I absolutely guarantee you that without them, I wouldn't be talking to you guys here today. Not only did they become some of my really good friends, I think they do a phenomenal job with the coral that they grow and that they bring in and care for. And that's why I became friends with them, not because they were local to me. I was like, man, these guys are actually doing it right. And, in the early 2000s, that wasn't commonplace. So glad that it is more commonplace now. So I started traveling with those guys, and we'd go to shows in New York and St. Louis and Miami, or not Miami, but Fort Lauderdale, and, all over the country. And that really helped grow my network. And I just met vendors like Raj mentioned, and then various clients. Actually, I started meeting through there, and kind of started flying around the country building tanks at that point for just kind of random people. I didn't have a YouTube presence. I still don't. I'm not great with that type of technology or social media, and I'm okay with that. So you guys that are great, keep it going. I watch the show, and we need all of the entertainment we can get, but that's not typically coming from me. And then eventually I met the Tenji owners at a show I was at with Raj in Boston. That was the first time I met him in person. It was called Raw Regional Aquatic Workshop, which is kind of
was it a letdown?
Huge letdown. Yeah, no. It was like they say, don't meet your heroes, right?
Were you like, dang, that's what you look like? Oh,
man, you look like me, Mark. No, Raw is kind of like a public aquarium magna. A lot of fun, a lot of great networking that happens, and so we met there and parted ways and talked about a couple projects we were both looking at the same time, and then we met again at a MACNA some months later. This is the co-owner of Tenji, Mark, and I ran to the restroom, and my wife was there, and later that night she said, when you ran to the restroom, Mark kept leaning over and telling me that he thinks I'd really like Monterey, California, where Tenji is based. And I was like, that's random. Why the hell is he? And I told this to another friend, Kai, who was there, and then Raj, and they were like, well, yeah, obviously they're going to try and poach you or bring you out there. So that's how that connection went. And at that time, I wasn't really interested in moving my business, but my wife was very interested in escaping Michigan winters. So there was a little pull from every direction, and Tenji needed the help, and sounded like a good time. So we made the leap, which was, as you can imagine, difficult, leaving everything that we'd grown for many years to work for someone else. That was not my direction or plan at all. But we just turned 6 years here, and these guys run an amazing company, and it's kind of the best of everything we need. We try and hire. So that's the designers, the fabricators, and then we work with the best vendors that we can find. And over the years have built just some fantastic relationships that allows us to pull these projects off.
That's awesome. Fun fact, my first legit coral was from Cherry Corals.
Hey, nice.
It was two hammers and two zoa frags.
Right on. Awesome.
do not have those anymore.
Yeah,
So.
that happens. They have more for you, Remy. I'm sure of that.
I know. I've heard.
Yeah, the last time I was
they,
their Zoa collection, it's like, I mean, it's literally just raceways full of corals, right? So
yeah.
we go to the shows and we see these tanks full of beautiful corals, but when you see 40 square feet right in front of you, one chunk after the other coral, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, they run a tight ship over there. I sometimes I'll just go to their website just to look because they have such great presentation of everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's fun seeing those guys at shows because they're always around.
Mm-hmm. I remember they always.
I saw you
merch.
on.
Do you remember?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, they've got a really cool logo. Yeah.
Yeah.
That dragon one, that's
the one.
Brett Harris's handiwork. I threatened to get that as a tattoo at some point, but I haven't. I still have like 3 or 4 of those shirts though. Those are awesome.
I saw you on Reef Bum a couple years ago. You did an interview with Keith, and I think we were at the height of COVID. I think it, maybe I don't want to say like in the middle of it, but maybe on the middle to back half of it. And you had mentioned, and I think we all have noticed that there was a lot of people coming into the hobby. A lot of people had extra time on their hands. Some people had extra money on their hands, so they were getting into the hobby. Now that we're on the other side of that, from your perspective, has there been any change here in 2023 that you've noticed?
That's a great question. So first and foremost, Tenji was born out of Monterey Bay Aquarium in 2001. 3 curators started the business back then, and their whole focus was kind of building aquariums for, public aquariums, museums, and science centers. The residential and commercial aspect didn't come in until later. So the company's kind of always been focused more on that industry. So pre-COVID, we were about roughly 75-80% of our business was the public aquariums, science centers, and 20-25% was private residential builds, and then commercial builds, which would be like doctors' offices, lawyers' offices, malls, airports, that kind of thing. When COVID happened, that percentage flipped. And that's probably what I was talking to Keith about at the time. And we'll all be honest, at Tenji, we thought we were going to be sending out resumes when COVID happened, because our business is based on public spaces that sell tickets to people that come in and learn and have fun. Well, if they're not going to sell any tickets, our phone's going to stop ringing. And what wildly happened was the phone kept ringing, but it was from the people who used to go visit the aquariums. They're at home now. They can't travel. Hey, I've always kind of thought about an aquarium. Austin, let's talk about an aquarium in my home. My first answer is you probably don't want one, typically. I'm pretty rough around the edges when someone's like, he and hawing about an aquarium. Let's be honest, you don't want an aquarium. If you want an aquarium, you have to want an aquarium. You have to be all in for it, right? And then let's go. Okay, let's go. So I would say that kind of leveled out back to the ratio that it was pre-COVID, but not to the extent that it was. We're still getting a lot more calls for private sector and commercial sector, which is kind of where I was born and raised, right? I came up working in people's homes, doing maintenance in lawyers' tanks and doctors' offices in Michigan. And that was kind of my forte. And so coming to Tenji and working a lot behind the scenes doing the public aquarium stuff was very different aspect. I think we're probably 60-40-ish now, public aquariums to private residential and commercial stuff. And we're very happy with that ratio. We're happy, frankly, if the phone rings for any ratio. We are a business at the end of the day. And there's very much pros and cons to both sides of it. So personally, I love running both projects at the same time. I'll get the best of both worlds and I'll get the worst of both worlds. But then at least I'm in the kind of both worlds at the same time. And they are very different. The way we approach them, the way we pull them off, the work that goes into them. Right now, I am mostly private industries. I'm running, a handful of projects, and I think only probably a quarter of them right now are public projects. But there's other project managers at Tenji, so that's only a small snippet of what we're doing. The 2 co-owners, they do the really big public aquarium projects. And so they're always more focused in that world. For example, most of those projects take 3 to 5 years to pull off, where a residential project will be 1 to 2 years typically to pull off. So there's just more time that goes into them.
Gotcha. Yeah, it was interesting. I don't know if you did any work with the St. Louis Aquarium, but in 2019, they were set to open and did open on Christmas Day of 2019. 2 months later, they had to close their doors. And I was doing YouTube content at the time, and they actually let me in to go like tour the place. Nice. When nobody else was in there. We were in masks. It was crazy, but got to document like the beginnings of their one coral tank that they have there. I think they've got a couple tanks with coral in them, but there's only one designated coral tank that everybody just walks by, which sucks because they all want to see sharks and octopuses and things.
Yeah.
But that was interesting. You had mentioned doctors, lawyers, dentists, that kind of thing. I've always wondered if there's any favorite fish amongst occupations. Like, do dentists have a favorite fish over lawyers and doctors, or is there any trends there at all?
I've never been asked that, and as soon as you ask that, yes, the thing with a resounding yes. I have no idea why I'm asked for it. It's not down to a species, but they ask for eels. In like most doctors and dentists' office I've worked in, I got to have an eel, Austin. I got to have an eel. And a lot of times not a lot of times, but at least half the time they'll have an existing aquarium. And for me, an eel is a biotope animal, right? If you want an eel, I'm going to design a tank for an eel, like for that species. And there's going to be pretty specific things built into that, like keeping them in the tank, for example, was number one. They'll want these giant moray eels in like a 75-gallon tank. So once we get past that hiccup, no, guys, we're not going to put a giant eel or any eel in this tank that's not designed for them. How about some Bengai cardinals? They'd look great. But that's a great question. Right? I mean, eels are the big thing. Clownfish are up there for sure as well. But nowadays, this is interesting. You guys are getting me to think. The past 5-6 years, I would say, I get asked for a lot less clownfish than we used to. Used to be just clownfish. You get sick of hearing about it, right? And now my maintenance manager, Sam, and we brought in a bunch of gorgeous captive bred clownfish and grew them out, had them ready to go. We couldn't get rid of them. We didn't know who would take them. Nobody was signing up for these clownfish. And I mean, when I say we hold fish for like 4 to 6 months. We're really growing them out, quarantining them. They're super solid fish. So we have all these money into these stupid captive bred clownfish and nowhere to go. Thankfully, we have some really big maintenance accounts. So we convinced one, hey, 28 clownfish is going to look fantastic in your tank. Trust me, give you a good deal.
Harem, let's go.
And they literally create this little ball in this 3,000-gallon tank. They have plenty of hiding. It's actually turned into a really, really cool display. It was not our intention. But yeah, eels are the big ask for sure.
That's funny. And I feel like it's got to be eels and sharks, right? And maybe stingrays or something, because I feel like a lot of these guys, they see the James Bond movies with the sharks in the background and things, and they're like, I want that in my dental office or whatever. But yeah, I
would say it depends on where you're at. And so when I was in Southeast Michigan, my phone would ring 2-3 times a week for, I need a shark tank. And I'm like, what? No, you don't. And I think just by the time someone finds out about Tenji or sees the website and whatnot, and if they see any shark tanks that we've done, they're tens of thousands of gallons and probably not something that someone wants to get into. So I don't know why we don't hear about it as much, but we hear some really funky stuff. So being known for more bigger custom builds, we'll get residential clients that call us and say, hey, I have to scuba dive my tank. That's the most common thing I hear about big residential tanks is I have to be able to dive my tank. And then I've had a couple times, I really want to be able to walk through the tank, like in a tunnel. And yes, I want to walk through your tunnel tank too, man. But we're talking about, there's only, certain public aquariums that can have that type of tank. So once we start talking about stocking it and the fact that there's going to be 2 divers in there 6 days a week cleaning it, we escaped those pretty quick, I think. We did. I don't know if you guys had seen it. We've only been able to share snippets of it, and I'm hoping to do a photo shoot there. But we did a legit, what I call a James Bond villain style pond this year, and it was for sharks and stingrays, and it's in a floor. With a couple little bridges that go over top of it.
That's awesome.
And it was something like me and the whole team, we were just geeking out when we were there. And so we very rarely see these things stocked. when we're done with the tanks, they're typically not even aquascaped. So we'll build everything, we get them water tested. We water test for a minimum of 24 hours. That's going to show us any leaks, threaded or glued fittings that we have to go back and look at. We drain them down, and then if it's a public aquarium, it's up to the public aquarium team to take it from there and decorate it and get it ready for animals and so forth. So we were all really excited for this pond I mentioned, but it just looked like a hole in the ground when we were done, and the decor around it was starting to look pretty cool. But the client's maintenance person sent me some photos the other day, and we actually got to see some rays in the pond kind of swimming together, and it was really, really cool.
That's,
So that type of exhibit needs a public aquarist to take care of it on the side.
That's really cool, because on my side, I get to see even less.
Yeah.
So when we work on these projects, we don't even get to see it like in this setting. We've got components that are going to be stacked up on a pallet or multiple pallets and put in a truck, and then it just disappears. Because, most of these projects get tied up in NDAs or with clients where you're not, let's say Tenji as the installer isn't maintaining it. So then it just kind of dies out. So at least you get to see a next level of what the work that you put into resulted in, which is really, really cool.
Sometimes I was just thinking, man, I send you pictures pretty frequently, but they're of things that I break that I need replacements of. Hey, Raj, look at this reactor that I shattered into pieces. And mind you, when I say this, I'm breaking them. We drop stuff. The way we work, it's an active construction site, and stuff happens. But yeah, so I'll try and be better about that, Raj. Maybe we'll get you some photos that look good.
Well, that was kind of my resolution this year that I dropped the ball on big time, was just for the team. I wanted to get them photographs of the finished display so that I can put it up on kind of like a cork board or something and say, hey, this is the project that you worked on such and such, because for them, it's even more of a dead end because they're not aquarists, so they don't really know. And they're not privy to a lot of the information that I will probably have on the design side. They've got a different set of drawings. They're working off of CAD drawings that has no renderings, no nothing.
Yeah, so, they're not pretty.
They're not pretty, right? It's
just glue this, yeah.
That's right. It's blueprints, and yeah. So maybe we'll make a better effort for that in 24.
We have a stand builder we work with down in LA, and this guy builds phenomenal steel stands for us, and all sizes, and he can bend metal like no other. It's really awesome. But he works with steel, and he does things for all industries, server racks, all kinds of stuff like that down there. So I sent him these pictures of his gear in the middle of a public aquarium with like a sea turtle swimming in the tank next to it. And he's like, "What the hell's going on over there?" I really like getting him riled up with the stuff that we do. But and then he's more excited when I call him. It's not just another random stand. It's, hey, this is going for some research project, or it's going to this school with a marine program, marine science program. So yeah, we do fun stuff, but I think we all wish we saw more of the end of it, right?
What do you enjoy more, the public aquarium side or the residential, let's say?
It totally depends on the client. I love all my clients that I work with. We are, and I mean that, we are thankfully in a position that we can be a little choosy. The project has to excite us to a certain point and make sense. Tenji has 3 departments. We're design and build, and then we have maintenance. And so if it's out of town, I need it to involve both design and build, not just one or the other. And if it's in town, we typically want it to involve the maintenance team too. So that kind of directs us towards which client we're going to work with to begin with. And then after that, I like the client that gives us the most artistic freedom. And through me understanding that over the past 21 years that I've been doing this, it's helped me work with other trades so much better. When I'm working with a general contractor for my own house, or when I'm working with someone who's a technician on a car, or an artist for some project that I'm engaging them for. It's like, hey, if the shoe's on the other foot, Austin, you're going to want some of this artistic freedom. Afford that to them, and hopefully that comes back over time to you as well. I mean, I've had a couple clients in the past. If you listen to this, I still love you, but we do like a big faux insert, so a big fake reef insert made out of resin. There's some the artists make really beautiful stuff. I know our reef listeners will be like, blasphemy, but they look really cool when you do them right. And in like a 20,000 gallon tank, most public aquariums do the faux stuff. But we've done a couple in the private sector, and I've had clients that want to like pick out the exact coral that goes there.
Yeah.
And if there's like 300 coral that goes on these things, it just doesn't work that way. So over the years, I've gotten pretty good at directing how those conversations go, as you know, Raj, but it is a learned thing. I would say typically I probably like the residential stuff more because that's just where I'm born from in this industry, and for the most part, I'm talking to someone who's really, really into it. That is, of course, true with the aquarists on the public aquarium side, but oftentimes I'm not working with the aquarists on the public aquarium side. I'm working with their architects, their designers, who are all great people, but they're not aquarium people. So when I have a conversation one-on-one with the actual end user in the residential world, they're excited about this from start to finish, about every little nut and bolt, and they can't wait to get an animal in there. Where if it's a 3 or 4 year long public aquarium build and we're dealing with a general contractor, he maybe can't wait to get out of there and move on to the next project and could care less about fish in general. He's doing a great job with us, but it's just not the same type of conversation that happens. So in that sector, to me, it's more like I'm a general contractor and I'm a builder, because we're talking about trellis hangers and how to anchor things with Simpson strong tie epoxy and blah, 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 and things that I literally did not care about or couldn't care less about when I started off being an aquarist. But it's the natural, progression of things. None of us thought we were going to be plumbers.
Right.
Probably none of us thought we were going to be, gluing animals to rocks, and submerging them. Like there's all these little things that happen. And I guess for me, it's just kind of gone off the deep end in a lot of ways. And now I do talk about 4-inch thick acrylic tanks and things like that.
It's hot. You don't have to say who, but do you have any celebrities on the roster?
Yes. I certainly can't say who. I can say that we did a tank in Little Wayne's old house.
Nice.
Yeah. He was apparently not so politely asked to leave the property by the neighborhood after he asked to build a skate park on the roof. The neighborhood said no, and he did it anyways. Nice. The skate park was still partially intact when we were there, so we got to go up and check it out. It is
so ridiculous,
down, but
Travis Kelce just moved into a new house in Kansas City. If you need any coverage of that, I might be able to help.
Let's go.
Hang out at Travis Kelce's house.
He needs a
he needs a huge reef tank. Austin, are you doing any maintenance these days regularly?
Well, I kind of mentioned it before we went live, but I have a super small aquarium here. It's actually my coworker Brian's former aquarium. It's like a 20-ish gallon all-in-one. And I have a habit of, I'm still a total fish nerd at the end of the day, right? So I have a habit of falling in love with some new captive bred fish, some rarer fish that hasn't been done before. And typically when they're released, I try and support that side of the industry by buying a couple. I bring them home, condition them, fatten them up, and then offer them to a client over time. So yes, but that would be the extent of my maintenance for the most part. We have a phenomenal maintenance team, and when we build a new local tank, I take the lead on how Austin would do maintenance on this tank. And then we are pretty transparent and open that an aquarist that we hire can do it in their own method within certain guidelines, if you will. So I will totally admit that I'll go out and set the initial guidelines, and they're changing more than ever nowadays when I come back around. They're like, you can listen to Austin, but then we'll show you how it's really done. And And I couldn't be more proud of the team that we have in place. So I am totally cool with that. But yeah, my aquarium maintenance is pretty much relegated to this little all-in-one I have at home at this point.
So my next question is based around the maintenance part. Could you remember, or when you're teaching protocol or whatever, take us through a maintenance on like a 100 to 300 gallon aquarium at a residential home from start to finish, the steps that you guys would do? Because I know it probably varies from the hobbyist to kind of where you guys are at on a commercial level.
Yeah. Well, and 100 to 300 is a big range for what we would do, but the basis is all the same, right? So for that size tank, whenever possible, we have a way that we plumb our water mixing tanks into the sump of the system, typically an iSump, and as we're doing a water change, you mix your salt in your saltwater mixing bin, and then you turn a valve at the sump and at the mixing bin. You actually send freshly mixed salt water into the sump that's pumped up to the tank via the supply pump. And then there's a bulkhead elsewhere in the tank to catch the overflowing water, the excess water that we're essentially displacing with the new water we're pumping in. So when Tenji builds this system, we do everything in our power to build that for our clients, no matter if we're maintaining it or not, because it's just the best way to do it. You don't have hose lying around, there's no buckets, and it's really straightforward way of doing maintenance. So what I'm about to say would involve that. So the first thing they're going to do is they're going to walk in and they're going to mix their salt, get it ready to rock if it's not already mixed. Then they're going to go and clean the acrylic or glass and any background, basically shake out any algae that you would, and you're going to have a nice clear water column for when you start. Then you're going to go and either siphon the sand bed or stir the sand bed. A couple different methods there. Both work, assuming you have a shallower sand bed. We don't run anything over 2.5, 3 inches typically. Deep sand beds definitely work. They can denitrify. It's a different conversation. They do crash over time, so we don't run them. So clean your sand bed, whatever that means to you. Most of the time now, we're just stirring the substrate, letting it get up into the water column and kind of go down in the filter socks. And that's the easiest way to get it out, because then you can take your filter socks out at the end, put in your fresh filter socks or media or roller fleece, whatever you're using. We definitely believe in a pre-filter to keep the rest of the system running its best, keep the water column super clear. So we've cleaned the glass, we've cleaned the substrate, and now we're going to probably look at, if there's 2-part, we're going to look at topping those reservoirs off. Several other little things we can do while the salt's still mixing, if that hasn't been done in advance, right? So that's going to be cleaning the protein skimmer cup, making sure that all the equipment is operating correctly. So our maintenance team is really good about prophylactically checking things. I've been in a position in the past where I was stretched so thin I couldn't do that, and you wind up being a maintenance company that just bounces around replacing things all the time. Well, we're thankfully really good about being on top of that. And so, okay, this heater's starting to look a little wonky. Let's take it out, replace that. This pump needs to be cleaned. We're going to do that. Oh, we found the impeller's broken as we're cleaning this pump. So again, just all this prophylactic little things. They're only cleaning the pumps, thoroughly like that every few months. I'll be honest about that. We're not in there cleaning those weekly. And then we're going to implement the water change. After the water change, we'll just make sure that the sensors, if the top off is doing its thing, are operating correctly, turn the power heads back on, and call it a day. I will say we're typically doing maintenance at least once or twice a week for most of our accounts. So once a month, there's going to be some additional stuff, which could include a pump cleaning the diffusers on the lights or the LEDs, getting a toothbrush in the overflow teeth, making sure that that's really clean. Once a year, we'll do a little bit bigger overhaul. If the pumps need to be removed, if they're hard plumbed in, with unions, we can do that. We have a way of hooking up vinyl tubing to barbed fittings on chillers. And so we'll run a acid solution through there to clean any calcium out of there if necessary. We've totally clogged up chillers with 2-part before, not paying attention to how it was mixing. So if you guys notice your chiller's not working as well, check for that if you're using 2-part. And then, rinse, repeat.
Yeah. I think you bring up a good point while, salt is mixing to just check the equipment, prophylactically, like you said. I think a lot of people, including myself, kind of don't do that step as much as we should. And then we run into problems down the road. Obviously, you're doing this on a commercial level or a more professional level than most hobbyists. So I just wanted to check and see how that lined up with, a typical, water change on a hobbyist tank. So I think that's pretty cut and dry. So thanks for taking us through that.
Yeah, of course. And remember, I'm a hobbyist at heart. So anything that I learned in that realm. In fact, some of the stuff when I came to Tenji, and I love Mark and Ed to death, but there were things from a hobbyist mindset that I brought to Tenji, and that was kind of like eureka bulbs. And of course, there were things they said from the public aquarium side of things. Oh, Jesus, I've never even heard of that. Like octopus hate astroturf. That's very well known in the public aquarium industry. Most hobbyists have probably never heard of it. You actually don't need a top on most octopus tank. You just line it with AstroTurf. Yep. They can't suction to it. They hate the feel of it. You're good to go. And, for many years I was building octopus tanks, trying to screw the lid down and whatnot. No, you don't need any of that. But
hang on, I need to order an octopus for my
yeah, right. I think the bigger changes in maintenance start to happen around 1,000 gallons, certainly at a couple thousand gallons. And, when we start getting into that, we're utilizing other pieces of equipment to lower the amount of water changes or percentage or frequency or amount of water used during a water change. We're talking big commercial denitrators from MRC, that kind of thing. We'll implement additional reactors to run even more media that we normally wouldn't run. But when you're filling up a 5,000 gallon water mixing tank, that gets really expensive, So a weekly 25, 30+% water change is oof. And we'll share the numbers with a client before we build this thing. Like, look, this is probably what it's going to take you to run this in a year. And I've been really far down the road with a couple clients that have plenty of money to do what they want with a big tank. And we look at the maintenance and they're like, oof, let's cut this in half. And that's not us doing maintenance. That's them doing it themselves. So we're just talking power consumption, salt, all that kind of stuff. It adds up.
How do you feel about refugiums?
You have to twist my arm to implement one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I'm wondering, because you guys are, you need to be kind of squeaky clean and get this stuff in and out, and do a couple, maybe 3-4 maintenances in a day. I mean, you got to be in and out. I would imagine a refugium might clog that up a little bit.
Yeah. So most of our technicians are only doing 1 or 2 accounts per day. Like, we try to give them a lot of time on site to do like the best job. I mean, our reef tanks, if you look at some of the Insta posts and stuff, like they look magazine cover type quality. That's what we're pushing them to do. It's not the maintenance company that I was brought up working for, or even ran for a minute. I mean, we eventually turned into it, but it's just a different style of doing things. And so I think it just kind of depends on the direction they want to go with it at the end of the day.
They want some cool macroalgae. That's why.
Yeah. So refugiums are phenomenal. They absolutely reduce nutrients. I mean, I've played with the Triton method on my own at the office for a while, and I think that's just amazing. The thing that we run into on a really wide scale is there's just a lot more nuance to running a system like that. If you implement a big water change, you're going to bring down the algae growing parameters, your nitrates, your phosphates, you're going to bring those down, and you're going to stabilize your coral building parameters, your calcium, alkalinity, magnesium. And you do all of that, which, as we all know, is some of the most important stuff, with one thing, and it's water change. So when we start to get away from that, what's our end goal? So the first conversation I would say with the client, and I've been, we've built a lot of refugiums, and I've had clients just say that they really want them. Great. That's all you need to tell me. But if your goal is growing, beautiful coral with some beautiful fish in a display tank, having a refugium on any smaller system, in my opinion, is going to detract you and, take a lot more time away from these other tasks that you're going to have to do at some point. Aptasia, Valonia, probably have some type of flatworm or some type of ailment outbreak for your fish, as we grow through the industry. So when people set themselves up with the refugium, well, you already have another couple pieces of equipment to maintain. And there's some chances of failure there if that refugium, grows a lot and you're not paying attention. They can overflow. But do they work? Do they reduce nutrients? Absolutely. just the way that we build systems, we can do it way more efficiently without them.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
So what are some takeaways that hobbyists can get that you have learned from the public aquarium side, right? Just some tricks and tips that they use that, like you said, it's that eureka moment, like, damn, that's pretty good, right?
Yeah.
That we can scale down and use as a hobbyist.
Do your water changes. like number one, the difference between talking to hobbyists and aquarists, that's probably the main conversation I get into, is hobbyists asking, how can I avoid doing water changes, and public aquarists saying, just do a water change. It's just kind of like it's just the thing to do, in the public aquarium industry. And then I'm lucky to be local to Monterey Bay Aquariums down the street here, and they have a flow through system. So
they cheat.
Constant water change, and I have a couple friends that work up there, and I'm like, are you an aquarist, or do you just turn up the valve and, do a bigger water change? And there's a couple MRC skimmers back there, but they don't have to have them do much because it is a constant water change. So yeah, that's a big thing. And I'm guilty of it too. Nobody likes doing water changes. So when I give presentations, the thing that I try to hit hard is build yourself a water mixing station that's easy to use and that you can dump a whole bucket or box of salt into at once. Mix it up, and you have the correct cylinder. You can walk away, and now you have a couple weeks or a couple months or several months worth of salt mixed up, ready to go. If you have an emergency situation, you can refill that, dump a bucket of salt in there, walk away, and you're good to go. So we do a lot of 200-gallon mixing bins for residential builds, because that's kind of like the bee's knees for that size, The other thing for public aquariums that is not ever a question is having backup power. I talk to a lot of doctors and lawyers about how often do you lose power, and what are you going to do when your office loses power? And I'm kind of met with a deer at the headlights. There's some really great little battery backups that are available, but my opinion is that those are just used until you can get a generator running. So having backup power is totally commonplace there.
Jim is happy right now.
Yeah, totally. Quarantine. Quarantine is, there's a couple mom and pop type public aquariums I've been involved with, I guess, that kind of struggle with that just based on labor and space alone. But for the most part, especially anything AZA affiliated, the bigger aquariums we go to, quarantine's not a question. There's specific spaces set up for it. If there is any issues, even something as simple as cryptocaryon, like ick, only certain staff is allowed in that room for the whole day, and they cannot go into the rest of the public aquarium gallery because they'll cross-contaminate it. They'll have foot baths, they'll have jackets, all kinds of stuff. So it's, backup power and having quarantine are things that we like to think about adding at some point. But the reality is, if we don't have them, we shouldn't be doing anything else until we kind of sort that out.
Common thread on this podcast is, having backup power. So
yeah, for sure. And with that said, the next thing would be backup parts. I always struggle to understand, because we don't do a ton of residential stuff here, and there's not like a super great small hobby community locally anyways. We have to go to San Jose, so about an hour away, and it's phenomenal. But we don't get a lot of calls anymore. I used to in Michigan, like, oh, I need this pump. My tank's dying. I don't have the main pump backup or an impeller or, an extra power head or something that my system requires to not only thrive on, but just to survive on. That's something that we don't ever talk about in the public aquarium industry. My quotes come with backup pumps and backup this and backup that. At least the main stuff, you don't necessarily have to have a backup everything. Even light, we typically don't have any backup light because even stony corals will be fine for 72 hours without light. It gets cloudy on the reef, but everything else you definitely want to have in your back pocket ready to go for sure.
Yeah. I'd probably say 70 to 80% of the average hobbyist does not have a backup return pump on hand.
Definitely.
Yeah, and for like the all-in-one tank I'm looking at over here, it's like $40. But and then even if it's 200, it's 200.
With e-tailers these days able to get you things so quickly, I don't know. Do you really need to invest that much into all of these backup parts? I mean,
yeah.
You've got your local stores that you can obviously run to, but they don't carry everything. And that's where these e-tailers really kind of taken over, is they do carry everything, and they can get it to you so damn quickly now.
Are you talking about Top Shelf Aquatics overnight shipping, Raj?
Talking to Steven and seeing what products they will actually overnight, I was blown away. Like, it's not just the smaller components. He was talking about bigger pumps and bigger items that they will have to your door the next day. That just sounds almost ridiculous. I'm impressed. I'm super impressed.
You're also giving every hobbyist a way out of having a backup pump on hand right now. You realize that?
I think you have your backup pump. You just don't have your backup everything else.
You don't have your backup everything else. Yeah, I mean, you've got to have a contingency plan at least, right?
I'd say a heater is probably good to have on hand as well.
Well, so for me, I never really kept a backup return pump, because my contingency plan was I've got flow in the tank itself, in the display. And as long as I have a contingency plan for that, I'm okay. I can do without a return pump for a couple of days. The fish are not the water quality isn't going to degrade that badly in 2 days that I can't get a pump, get it installed, and be back up and running. But
dig it.
That doesn't necessarily scale, right? When you're dealing with multi-1,000-gallon aquariums, now the game has changed.
Yeah, we got about 40 minutes till stuff starts to die.
Yeah.
Damn, that is so quick. Ugh.
For the heavily stocked.
Man.
The anchovy tank, if it's an anchovy or sardine tank, you've got about 15 minutes.
Wow. Man, that's crazy. How do you guys use UV on all your tanks, on all your systems?
Most of them, for sure. I mean, I know it's heavily debated. It's not under our rooftop, where I'll totally admit most things are. Our company will debate metal halides, LEDs, pump choices, all of this. But when it comes to UV, we don't debate it. It's pretty rare anyways. And the main reason is that it's a phenomenal safeguard. At the very least, it's a phenomenal water clarifier. Nobody can argue that if it's implemented right. But then we do take those next ladder rungs, depending on the system, depending on what we're designing for. And those next ladder rungs are going to be to control certain types of waterborne bacteria, and then even eventually parasites, and everything in between. If it's like a small residential reef tank or something, we might not implement it if there's only going to be a few fish and they're on a super tight budget. But I'm still going to try to put at least a little something on there that's going to do the work for us. Definitely, we firmly believe in them.
Gotcha. That's good info. Well, I want to be cognizant of your time, and I know we're coming up on our end here, but definitely want to have you on again. I feel like we only kind of grazed the surface of what you do, and I really want to talk about fish next time we get you back on.
Oh, definitely.
I know that you're a big fish guy.
In prior years, that was definitely a big portion of what we did, and I'm looking at a pair of Caprivet Interruptus that I've been conditioning for a client. So I'm still in the world to some degree. We actually, I will say that we don't quarantine in-house anymore. We're working with a pretty phenomenal company down in LA, because thankfully we're busy, and quarantining animals correctly takes a lot of time, and time is money. And so if we can outsource something that I truly trust, we're going to do it. But I can talk about fish all day long, Remy. So you let me know and I'll be back.
For sure. Yeah. The Interruptus Angel I want in my tank at some point. Our LFS has had one for the past year and a half. And because it's $3,500, nobody is buying it. And this thing just eats coral like crazy. It's so fat.
Yeah.
It's as big as they will get, right?
Sure.
For a dwarf angel or whatever, but it picks it. I was like, so is he eating coral? And they're like, oh yeah.
Yeah.
He eats everything. So
I mean, the trick with angels in a nutshell is grow your coral faster than they can eat it.
There you go.
Yeah.
You'll be all right. But don't put them in a young tank. Put them in a well-established. This pair is going into a very grown-out reef tank. My maintenance team is going insane. They're like, you're going to kill all the coral, man. This is horrible. We've been working so hard for years, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, they're just mowing the grass. Don't worry about it. And,
it's all natural.
It's all natural. The corals are super healthy. They'll be able to take a little beating. So, yeah. But
yeah.
Thanks so much for having me, guys. This was awesome.
Yeah, I want to thank you for joining us on the Reef Therapy podcast. If you've got any questions for Austin or Raj or myself, please post them in the comment section below. I want to thank ICP Analysis for being an awesome sponsor. More at icpanalysis.com, and we'll see you in the next one.
Bye.
Bye, guys.
Thanks, guys.